this morning. We just thank you so much for having us. And what we're going to do this morning, we'd just like to share a little bit of our testimony about how God's called us to go. We haven't been yet. We've been on short-term mission teams, but we haven't been on our first official stay as full-time missionaries. So we're going to be doing that in about 3 weeks. We're going to be flying out. So it'll be our first time down there as full-time missionaries. But we would like to share with you a little bit about what God's been doing in our lives over the last few years and what we hope to see God do in the future. So I'll just let Christine get started.
You know, I loved hearing this morning that when she was praying, she said, you know, as a little girl, I thought you had to move to Zimbabwe to be a missionary, and those were people in a magazine. I know I grew up, and missions was a big part of my life. Grew up in GAs and Act Teens, and I remember the prayer calendar. Anybody remember the prayer calendar in your guide? Very similar to what we still see in Missions Mosaic today, and we prayed for them on their birthdays. And so that was always a big part of my life, from mission friends through GAs and Act Teens. And I was very fascinated with women especially who were willing to take the gospel around the world. I mean, I thought North American mission boards, or back in the day we called them home missionaries and foreign missionaries. I was, fascinated with home missionaries, but not like I was with those who were with the International Mission Board. I was fascinated with those people, like Lottie Moon, who were willing to take the gospel to the uttermost parts of the world.
I grew up in church, and I knew what the Bible said about missions, but I did not really have a missional mindset. I knew that I needed to go on mission trips, and I knew that it was a good thing, and it made me feel good inside, and all that kind of stuff. But the mission trips that we would go on would usually involve going out into a community and doing some sort of work, or and that was kind of my exposure to missions as I was growing up. But it's definitely changed my view of what missions is now, and it's helped to shape me throughout the years.
As a child and as a teen, as a college student, as a young adult, I have served on many mission trips, and mostly what we did was building Bible schools, backyard Bible clubs, passing out literature, prayer walking. And please hear me when I say all these things are wonderful. But none of them spoke to me and said, this is what it looks like to take the gospel to someone who may never hear. And at 21, Steve can attest, I stood up in front of our church at Parkwood, and I had an undeniable call to full-time ministry. There was no doubt in my mind at 21 God was calling me to full-time ministry. I was accepted to Southeastern Seminary after I was supposed to graduate from college. Matthew and I got married, and God continually closed those doors. Many times in my life I had folks say, but you said you were called to full-time ministry. And I never had an answer. And I said to them, it was an undeniable call, but the door's not open. So I taught for 16 years in the public school system. I took Jesus to kids who I'm sure never saw Jesus in their home. And so that became my mission field. In 2014, Dr. Richie Allen, who is the founder of Link Up Missions, came to speak at our home church, and he told me a story about a man named Duval, who I have now had the privilege of getting to know, and I call him my friend, one of the most amazing men I've ever met. But he told me this story about Duval. Duval was a man who lived in a very remote village in Brazil. He was a quilombola at that time. I didn't know what a quilombola was. I just knew that they were in Brazil and they didn't know Jesus. But this man lived there. He lived in a very, very dark village who practiced a very, very dark religion. And his daughter's teacher, her name is Midian, who is one of the most precious ladies I've ever met, came and was tutoring his daughter in school. It's a very uneducated society, culture. But she came and she saw something in this little girl, and she was tutoring her. And in the midst of tutoring her, she began sharing scriptures from the Bible, and she began sharing Bible stories with this little girl. Well, her daddy heard it from the other side of the kitchen wall, and he didn't like it. He banned them to the porch at one point, and he kind of felt bad that he banned them to the porch, and he let them come back in. But he continued to listen. And you know, it's funny how God can reach the ears of those who don't want to hear, even when they don't want to hear. And God continued to reach his ears until one day, Duval could no longer deny that God had captured his heart from listening behind the kitchen wall. He began Bible studies under a mango tree in his village. Under a mango tree. I know you guys are excited to be moving to a new building the first of the year where you don't have to set up. But guys, under a mango tree, he began telling Bible stories to his village, and he began bringing the light of Jesus into his village. And I vividly remember sitting in the pew that I always sit in and thinking, that's what is missing. That's what's been missing all these years for me. I want to take the gospel to the people who have never heard. Not just the lost, but those people who have never heard the gospel, if I don't take it.
A few years ago, our church decided to partner with Link Up Missions. Link Up is a 501(c) mission mobilizing agency based in Florida. And Link Up is an acronym, and it stands for Linking International Needs with the Church's Untapped Power. And I'm trying to make sure I don't leave anything out here. The untapped power of the church resides in the thousands of people just like us who can and should be used for the expansions of God's eternal kingdom. And Link Up's founder, Dr. Richie Allen, has served as a pastor for years, and he also teaches missions now at the Baptist College of Florida. And God has given him a burden for the remaining 3,000 plus unreached people groups throughout the world. But his focus right now is on the quilombolas of Brazil. And the quilombolas are descendants of runaway slaves from the slave trading era. And most folks don't know that for every one slave that was brought to the United States, North America basically, there were 20 that were taken to South America. And so they have a tremendous amount of African slaves that were brought to South America. And these runaways, they would escape their masters, or at some point, I don't know exactly what year, but the slave trade was abolished in Brazil, and so they actually escaped into the jungles of Brazil, and they started their own communities and their and villages, and in order to avoid being captured again. And so Link Up, they actually locate these remote villages, and they reach out to these people. And the quilombolas have maintained their African traditional religion that is replete with demon spirits and witch doctors, which is a very, very dark religion. And they've heard very little, if anything, of the God of the Bible, which is what we've been tasked to do. And Link Up uses we use Bible storytelling methods to actually share the gospel with them, because most of them are illiterate. They don't read, and education as far as school is not very important to them. Some of them it is, and some of them do go to school, but a lot of them are still illiterate. And so we have to reach them with the gospel through storytelling. And we began our partnership with Link Up by training and trying to understand the model of storytelling methods. And once we began to understand the model of spreading the gospel through the storytelling method, we really fell in love with their model. And But Link Up's goal is to create indigenous congregations, which means that's congregations that reflect the people and the culture where it's planted, not a white Southern Baptist American church, which is what most of us are used to. And they also create non-dependent congregations, ones that are not dependent on outside resources or funding from American or Brazilian churches. That's our goal, is to create a non-dependent church. And they also want to create a self-propagating congregation, and they employ the methodology that can be reproduced by the native people. And the only way to ensure that disciples of churches are able to reproduce themselves is by Quilombolas telling Quilombolas about Christ. And that's the best way to reproduce the gospel, is by their own people telling them about Jesus. And back to our testimony, we when the first trip at our church was announced to Brazil, I really didn't give it much thought. It really wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even think about going. And then the same day, my wife comes home and says, "Hey, I'm going to Brazil on a mission trip, and with the church." And I was like, "No, you're not. I don't think that's a good idea at all." And you can guess who won that one. And so, so after that spat, and that she of course won, I said, "Well, if you're going, then I'm going to go too, because I'm going to protect you from these heathens down in Brazil." And because I didn't know anything about it, I had no clue what was going on down there, so I didn't know what to expect. But once we went on that first mission trip, it was in July, or was it July or October? October of 14. I fell in love with the whole Link Up concept of sharing the gospel. God just got a hold of me like He's never gotten a hold of me before, and He started working. I didn't, didn't know at that time that it was going to be a full-time call, but God got a hold of me, and He made me fall in love with these people and with sharing the gospel in this way. And the model of missions that Link Up that they employ is just it's amazing. And this is what missions are all about. This is what missionaries do. Is they go, they love people, and they get to know them. They go into their villages and they share the gospel with them, and they show them the love of Jesus. They don't just tell them about Jesus. They show them the love of Jesus. And over the next 2 years, I actually went to Brazil 5 times, and 2 of those times were actually without Kristen. And the last time that I went without her, I was, for some reason, I was just miserable. It just was not a good experience for me. The sharing the gospel was great, but just being without her, I just felt like I was missing something. And I realized that I didn't want to do this without her anymore, and that we needed to be together. And throughout the year, I'd also get little snippets of comments from people like, "Why don't you just move to Brazil? You go there enough," stuff like that. And that was God working on me throughout the years, and He was pointing me in the right direction, but I was too stupid to realize it. And even Richie Allen, our director, he in the front of his book, he's got a book that he came out with on cross-cultural missions. In the front of it, he wrote, "Matthew, be careful, missions are getting in your heart." And I had no idea what that meant at the time, but now I do. And it's just, as I look back, I see how God used all of those comments, all of those things that He was pointing me in the direction of missions, and I see how He's turned my heart, and it's just amazing to watch Him work.
So during each trip I took down to Brazil, I began seeing the stories from the Bible unfold in front of me, and I remember just that feeling of times of thinking, I feel like I'm standing in a Bible story. And I could just see them unfold around us. Some of these times were frightening, some of them were exciting. In one of our villages, the village that we started our initial work in 2014 with our home church, there is a witch doctor, and she's a very influential witch doctor in the area. She's kind of a head witch doctor over communities of witch doctors. But she also holds a very prominent place outside of her community, which is kind of unusual. But she works for the Department of Agriculture, I guess for lack of a better term, in the town near them. So pretty much what they do is they stand in line, and she says, oh, you get to work today in the fields. No, like you don't get to work in the fields today. So she holds a lot of influence on what happens in her community because she decides whether you work or not. So she sought me out very early on, was very friendly with me. But she gave me this uneasiness that I don't really even know how to explain. But she wanted her picture taken with me. She wanted to talk to me. She wanted her friends to meet me. And at first, it was kind of flattering. Oh, the witch doctor thinks I'm special. Now that I look back on that, I don't know that that's a good thing if the witch doctor thinks you're special. But what I realized was she saw me as competition. The other ladies who were on our team are phenomenal ladies who I would love to continue to sit at the feet of and learn from. But one of the ladies in particular who was an 8-year IMB missionary to Brazil and brought wisdom like none other to our team is very quiet and in the background. And I'm not very quiet and in the background. And so this witch doctor saw me as her competition. She saw me as a strong Christian female, and she didn't know what to do with me. Just like in John 15:19, it says that she could see that I was not of this world, and she hated me for it. So taking the gospel began to these folks took on a new meaning. And I started to realize that if I didn't take the gospel to her dark village, that nobody may ever take it. Now understand, I'm going to take a side note here. When we talk about the unreached, folks, the Quilombolas have never seen a Bible. They've never heard of the God of the Bible. They've never heard the stories. And if we don't take it, they won't hear it. I love what you said about the girl in the sound box yesterday, because it's such a great illustration. She has access. Folks in Cabarrus County, absolutely, there are folks who have never heard. They are lost and they are going to hell if we don't do something about it. Right here in Cabarrus County, right here in the central neighborhood. But they have access. And shame on us when we don't give them access, when we don't show them where the access is. We are also called to the lost next door neighbor. But I realized that my next door neighbor does have access to the gospel. The folks we work with in the Quilombola villages, they don't have access. And if I don't take it, they may never hear. I would lay in bed at night and I could see Matthew and me and the kids in Quilombola villages. Not Quilombola villages I had been in. Not anything I had seen or heard before. I could see my kids playing, and I could see us telling Bible stories in the dark of night in Quilombola villages. During those 2 trips that Matthew took without me, my heart ached to the point of uncontrollable sobs. Not because I missed Matthew. It was quite nice to stretch out in bed at night for 2 weeks. I mean, not really. But it wasn't even about the fact I missed him. it broke my heart that I was missing an opportunity to share the gospel alongside of him to people who would not hear. During this time, I was teaching, and Matthew and I felt led for me to leave my teaching career and work with him full-time in a business as a general contractor that he had had for years. And we both sort of kind of laughed because we are very different personalities and we do not work the same way and we cannot work in an office together. And God, this is just probably not a good idea. But about 2 a.m. One night in August of 2015, we decided I would resign my job. I went in, resigned, and began working with Matthew full-time. And never in my wildest dreams did I think that he and I would be able to work in the same office together. He needs complete silence, and I do not. I'm like rocking out to, 80s rock, and he's like got earplugs in his ears. But we can finish each other's thoughts and ideas on design and tile and what? This is only God working. And we begin God seeing us, forcing us into situations where we had to rely on each other. And he allowed me to begin to see my husband's devotion to his work ethic, and this just began to translate into our finances, our kids, and little did we know, our future.
And then one night in November of 2016, we were both lying in bed, and Kristen said, she looked over at me and she said, "What if we were called to Brazil full time?" And I said, "I would go tomorrow." And it was at that moment that we realized that we'd both been called at separate times. We'd been being called over the last couple of years, but we realized at that moment that God had been calling us, and so we realized that this is what we needed to do, and we didn't have a clue about how to go about doing it, but we knew this is what God was calling us to do.
My husband is not a risk taker at all, financially, professionally. Just not a risk taker. His passion is leading music. He has led our praise and worship team for about 10 years at our home church. He works with his hands. He's a general contractor. But I could hear in his heart, and I understood that God was calling us to carry out his work in his time. And I suddenly understood that the call he placed on my heart 20-some years ago was coming to fruition. That he had called me as a 21-year-old to full-time ministry. But he had to put his pieces together in his time. When Ed was talking about timing, gosh, his time was so perfect. And we started to see that his time was perfect. But then there was the reality of really he's going to call us out of a successful career. I work with the children at church. He leads the praise team. Our kids are happy. Our son's about to eagle. Our daughter's starting gymnastics. Surely we got this wrong. But as we prayed and we sought God's hand, we realized that our life did look like a perfect little fairy tale. But that didn't matter. We saw that we were ready to put the gospel above our business, above our positions in church, above our money, and above our perfect little fairy tale. So right at a year ago, we called up Richie Allen, and he wasn't surprised at what he heard from us, that we thought maybe we were being called to full-time missions. And he told us that 2 years prior to, on our first trip, he and our pastor, Michael Waters, talked. And Richie said, "Those are the kind of folks I want on our team." Neither of them ever shared that with us. But again, it became evident to us that other people were seeing it. So maybe we weren't so crazy after all. Or maybe they were crazy too. I don't know. Even my little Anna, who was 7, she was 6 at the time, she prayed one night out of the blue that God would send people to give clean water to people who don't have clean water and tell them Bible stories, which is what we do with Link Up. Even this little girl who really, she really didn't know what we did with Link Up, even she was being spoken to by God. Our pastor was leaving for sabbatical right at a year ago. I called him 2 days before he was leaving, and I said, we've got to talk to you. And he's a good friend of ours, and I guess he could hear in my voice that something wasn't quite right. And he said, oh gosh, is everybody okay? I said, everything is good. We just need to talk to you, maybe sit down with coffee tomorrow. And he said, do you need to talk to me about going into missions? And I thought, well, I don't think Matthew told him, and I know I haven't told him. And so we sat down with him, and again, he said, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. And he gave us a great illustration that we use every day. And he said, you know, God's plan for you guys in missions is kind of like he holds the flashlight. And you know, if I'm walking down a path and I'm holding a flashlight, the only way I can see past the beam of the flashlight is to do what? Take the next step. But you can't worry about what's out in the dark because you can't see that. So you take the next step and God will continue to show you what is in the light. In sitting in one of his sermons during that time, he asked us about our life's prayer. And at that moment, I realized I wanted that my life's prayer was to wipe the Kilombola people from the unreached people group list. And I knew that if I didn't take the next step to see what was on the other side of his light, that was never going to happen.
We actually took a family mission trip, just the four of us, back in April, where we got to actually see what it's like to be a missionary in Curupu, which is where Link Up's
home base
is in Brazil. And we knew that this experience would either deter us from pursuing the missions avenue or fuel the fire. And that's all it's done so far is fuel the fire. We've had a renewed vision of how God could be glorified by our coming to Brazil as missionaries, and we long to be with the people of the Quilombola villages, and we cherish the relationships that we've already been cultivating. Our kids are going to have to be homeschooled. This just means a complete life change for us. Our business that we really love is going to have to be shut down, and we're going to be separated for long periods of time from our family and friends. And we'll be living completely on the donations of others. But if there's anything that we've learned over the past few years and through this whole experience, it's that the gospel is worth it. There's nothing at this point that would deter us from taking the gospel to these people who haven't heard, because God is worthy of their praise. God longs to have their hands raised to him in praise because he's worthy of it.
We kind of laugh daily at God's sense of humor. We aren't financial risk takers, and I'm a public school teacher, not a homeschool mom. Anybody that knows me is like, really? You're going to homeschool your kids? I'll homeschool my kids. It's a big thing. I'm like, can you get me a bigger flashlight for that, God? Because I really need to see a little bit more that's out there. But again, I'm taking it one step at a time, and I hope that flashlight bulb does not burn out. We have a beautiful home that right now we're going to be able to keep because we will be stateside and need to stay there. But we've got to walk out of that and leave that. We have a beautiful church family. And we have there are a lot of unanswered questions for us, but we rest in knowing that God will continue to shine his light in his perfect time. And sometimes we don't need to see what's at the end of that light. This past June, we officially announced our call to full-time missions at our home church, which was a great occasion for us to just really get to share that with our home church. And then in October, we signed our first contract with Link Up Missions. Little did we know that God thought, I guess, we needed to be on the fast track. We originally thought, I actually have it written in my journal. We kind of laughed when we were in Kurupu back in April, one of our other missionaries, we were like, God, we just really wish we knew when we were going to be on the field. And he said, July 17th, 18. Write it in your journal. There's your date. I mean, he just like randomly threw it out. Okay, so fine. Then we started thinking, okay, it's going to be like June. And then Richie called and said, I'm thinking maybe March. I'm thinking maybe mid-January. Okay, we fly out December 30th. Fast track, thanks Lord, bigger flashlight. This is a joyous and exciting time for us, but I'm not going to lie to you, it's also scary and it's also uncertain. Due to visa regulations, we can only stay in country 90 days at a time, so we'll be there 90 days, and then stateside working with partner churches 90 days at a time. So December 30th, we're going to fly out of here, and we're going to go from the familiar to the unfamiliar, to the known to the unknown, from the safe to the unsafe. We are moving our first year to probably 2 years to the city of São Luís. It's an island in the northeastern coast of Brazil, and we have a foreign exchange student right now at our church who is from Brazil, and she looked at me and she said, why would anybody want to go there? It's a very large, boisterous, dark, dirty city. I don't know how else to put it. And it's scary to think that I'm going to be walking my sweet little 7-year-old daughter around the city, a city that ranks in the top 15 most dangerous cities in the world. I can't understand the language. I don't understand the culture, and I know that there are unknown risks, but we are willing to do it. I will have to stay alone in the city for a week while Matthew comes back home mid-January to get the kids. Don't really know how I'm going to do that in a city where I don't know what I'm doing, but I will. But we know that God is taking us there for His purposes. We will spend, and I'm sure that Stephanie can attest to this, my first year, 2 years, I'm pretty much going to learn how to navigate a city in a new country, learn a new language. Through our language coaches, we'll homeschool our kids, and we'll understand cultural norms. Before we can ever go into a Quilombola village, we have to understand that the cultural norms that we do day in and day out here don't work there. So our head is already spinning. I was a little heartbroken when I found out that we weren't going to be able to go into our villages the first year or so, but we know that God has a plan for us. I am not heartbroken to know that every shred of language I learn and culture I learn and relationship that we begin to cultivate in the city will go towards reaching the Quilombolas.
So in about 3 weeks,
We'll go
from financially secure to
financially uncertain. And while Link Up
as a global partner of the IMB, we don't receive any IMB funds.
good here. Okay. All right. Being a global partner of the IMB means that they do not have
to work with the people that we actually work with, but they've given us their blessing to go forward working with these folks because they don't have any missionaries that are actually in that area.
My recorder. And we are completely dependent upon the Lord for our needs and our contributions through family and friends, and through members of local churches, businesses, and church budgets. Link Up requires that we reach a minimum sustainably monthly income before being sent onto the field. Therefore, we are asking you to pray what the Lord would have you contribute to Link Up missions on a monthly basis for our account. We survive by the faithfulness of globally conscious Christians who commit to give $10, $20, or even $50 a person. And you may say, I can only give $10 or $30 per month. And some people don't think that's a lot, but what we want you to realize is that any amount can help. Just to give you an example, $10 a month will is $120 a year, which will supply us with food staples in Brazil like eggs or bread, just our basic needs of food. And $20 a month or $240 a year would pay our electric bill for the 6 months that we're actually in Brazil. $50 a month or $600 a year would provide us with a year of our required insurance that we have to have in order to be in country. $75 a month or $900 a year would cover the costs on ground, like buses, ferries, of our on-ground transportation. And $100 a month or $1,200 a year would pay our rent and utilities, as the apartment that we're going to be required to be in. Safety comes with at a cost, and so we actually are going to be in a safe area, but you got to pay for it. And then $150 a month or $1,800 a year would cover one plane ticket for the 8 that we have to purchase each year, because we have to purchase 2 sets of round-trip tickets to Brazil each year. And maybe monthly giving doesn't fit your personal budget, and you would just want to do a one-time-a-year gift. Maybe you get a yearly bonus or something like that. You would want to give out of that. And these gifts are very important also, the one-time gifts. Through some recent one-time gifts, we've actually been able to purchase some necessities that we've needed, like sheets and things to get started, because this apartment's unfurnished, and suitcases and things like that we have to have to get started. And they also will provide some of our travel expenses that we'll have to have. So don't just think just because you can't give a large amount or that you can't give monthly that your gift isn't appreciated, because it is very much. And every penny helps us to spread the gospel to these people who are sitting in darkness, just waiting on them, like someone to tell them about Jesus Christ. And of course, your donations are tax deductible, and they're through Link Up Missions, which is our missions agency that is a nonprofit. And but financially is not the only way that we're asking you to help us. We desperately need your prayers. We have several ways that you can support us through prayer and encouragement. We've set up some of the where is it? Okay, sorry. Oh yeah, there it is. Facebook, right there it is. I'm not on Facebook. I don't do Facebook. She does Facebook, and that's why I'm glad
He just thinks he's not on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. She does that. But you can reach us at Link Up Missions, and Trick is actually the is it?
There it is, right there. Link Up Missions.
All right, great. There you'll see updates and prayer needs, and you won't be able to see our location, and you'll never see actually the name of the Quilimbolas. Because the government down there would love nothing more than to keep these people in the dark. They're very oppressive toward these folks, and so we try not to draw any more attention to them than is needed. And our e-pray networks we have emails that'll go out different times of year, and if you sign up for some of those, don't expect to get an email every month or every week, because our internet is pretty spotty down there. And so we'll send them when we can. Bulk emails are just really hard, even with good internet service. But please do come to our table and look at the specific prayer teams that you can sign up for, because there are things like you can pray for our finances, you can pray for our children's educations. You can come alongside us and join in our goal of reaching these folks for Jesus Christ.
We do have some pictures.
Yeah, we do have some pictures for you to take with you. There are cards of actual people that we've shared the gospel with, and each one of these villages and people that you'll look at in these pictures are people that the gospel has been shared with. So we're praying for them every day that God's going to touch their hearts. And when you see these people, when you see these faces, just know that these people are most of them are hopeless, and the only thing that they have, and the only thing that they're going to be able to cling to is Jesus.
We just want you to think about how God would have you to support spreading the gospel to those who may otherwise never hear. Is it through a monthly financial support? Maybe where is He asking you to give up and change your habits? Give up at Starbucks once a week, once a month, once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. I don't know. Is He asking you to give up lunch out once a month? Is He asking you to maybe reallocate some funds? Is He asking you to give up that bonus that you just got that maybe you weren't expecting? But guys, sometimes more precious than money, especially I know moms who are crazy all the time. Sometimes with my kids, I'm like, oh gosh, here's the check for school, whatever. Sometimes more precious than money is our time. You know, I don't have time to get done what I'm supposed to get done on a daily basis. And you want me to take extra time out to pray for an unreached people group? I get it, guys. Time is valuable. 5:30 comes and I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. I just went to bed. You know? Or that, you know, the day gets away from you. And you want me to carve out time to pray for missionaries? Pray for an unreached people group? And I've stopped myself a lot recently to say, what is more important than me praying for the souls of the unreached? Guys, nothing is more important. If we don't specifically and fervently pray for unreached ears and unreached hearts, they'll never be eliminated from the unreached people group list. Romans 10:14-15 says this, and we've heard this before. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? We all love that verse, right? We need to send missionaries. But how many of you know what the next verse says? 15 says, and how can anyone preach unless they are sent? How can they preach unless they are sent? God called us out of this association that you're a part of, guys. He is asking this association to send us, our home church to send us, our partner churches to send us, because He wants to duplicate what's happening right here. Guys, we can be called to go all day long, but if we don't have senders to send us, we can't. We are all called to spread the gospel. Some of us as goers. Is that a word? I don't know. Goers, and some of us as senders. So we'll agree. We'll be the goers. Okay? We'll be the goers. But what is your part of sending? What if your part of sending is praying during your 45-minute commute for doors to be open, relationships to be built, hearts to listen? What if your part of sending, oh, wait for it, is to get up 30 minutes early to pray for missionary safety or resources and finances? What if your part of sending is to provide funding for missionaries to live safely during language training? What if your part of sending is to provide the financial means for missionaries to be located in a new specific unreached region? What if your part of sending is to provide respite or help for missionaries when they're stateside? What if your part is to encourage missionaries through notes or emails or texts? What if your part of sending doesn't happen because money's too tight, time's too short, life's too busy, you forgot that text? What happens then? Here's what happens, and this is the reality. Missionaries can't go, and the Quilombolas remain in a life of darkness. Quilombolas will not hear if we do not go. And this beautiful, beautiful people group that we've come to love will not be beside us in heaven. Your support financially is certainly not for our financial freedom. And your prayer is not about making our lives easier. Your encouragement is not because I need a pat on the back to say I did a good thing. It is because He is worthy and He is good. Habakkuk 1:5 says, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something you would not believe, even if you were told. You wouldn't believe it if I told you. Whether you're called to go or whether you're called to be a sender, we all want to desire to be a part and watch God move through a nation, through a culture, through a people group. Let us just sit back and be amazed and watch what he does as we go and as we send. For it won't be anything we can imagine, and it will only be a plan that his hand can orchestrate. Let's pray.
Heavenly Father, we do thank you so much that churches, Father, here are sending. God, we thank you so much for their time, God, for their prayers, for their encouragement, for their financial support. God, not for our glory, but for yours, because you are worthy, God. You're worthy of the praise of the quilombolas of Brazil. God, you're worthy of the praise of all people groups in the world. And God, we just pray that we would be able to be a part, God, of what you're doing. God, we just thank you so much for your presence here today, God. We're humbled by your presence, and we're in awe of your presence because you're such a great God, and we don't ever want to put you in a box. God, we don't ever want to expect anything less than what great things you're going to do. We know nothing is impossible with you, and we just pray that you would pour out your blessings on your people this morning. In Jesus' name.